Hello, I'm Stephanie Mandeville, Communications Director for NEA Rhode Island, and this is Ask Larry and Bob. Today is Friday, April 9th, 2021, and I am joined, as always, by Larry Pirtle and Bob Walsh. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Steph.
Good morning, Stephanie.
Bob.
Good morning, Larry.
Morning, Bob.
It's a beautiful Friday spring day.
Yes, it is.
Ready for that change of season?
Very welcome.
Yes, it is very welcome. We have just a couple of things to start off with, Bob. There was a conversation about office operations at 99 Bald Hill. You want to tell us about it?
Sure. More and more people are questioning when we can expect to have our own office open, and we are generally following NEA's lead on this. We do not expect a full office opening until September 1st out of an abundance of caution. We reserve the right to change our mind on that during the summer, depending on conditions. But right now, please don't plan any meetings in the office. I think my quote on this is, if your name is not on a door in the office, please don't plan on coming to visit the office or scheduling meetings there until in the Labor Day timeframe. And for our staff folks, everyone is not back at once. People coordinate with each other to go in and use the office as they say fit, but most folks are still working remotely. And you'll find NEA is doing similar things. Travel is not a big issue with us, but most travel is still advised against until we get to a better place.
Sounds good. So the other announcement that I have is going to segue us into our first segment. Next week, Tuesday, April 13th at 3 p.m. is a rally for the blind and visually impaired students who are rallying for equity. Basically, it's Tuesday the 13th at 3 at the Vets in Providence. Mask wearing obviously needs to be done. I will post the information about parking, etc. And it's what they're demanding is quality of services and equity for blind and visually impaired students, fair funding and equity in our state budget, transparency and communication from RIDE to all stakeholders, funding of Rhode Island Vision Education Services Program must happen because it's the law. That's what it says on their flyer, which I will include. Bob, this was last week, you were a guest on Lively Experiment, and this was your outrage of the week. Can you give us a little background on this and bring us up to the RIDE meeting that took place this week, and then Larry will take it.
Yes, absolutely. For as long as I can remember, and I have a long memory, my entire time with NEA, so that's almost 30 years, there's been a program run by the state to provide teachers to school districts to work with students who are blind and visually impaired. And it's a really good program. The teachers in that program happen to be represented by our colleagues at the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals. And I'm not sure if I first became aware of the program when they were housed at the Rhode Island School for the Deaf, where we represent the teachers, or because I remember discussing the implications of how it worked at the districts I represented when I was a UniServe director, where those teachers would work with our teachers when they had a student in class who was either fully blind and needed Braille translations and all of that, or was visually impaired and still needed a lot of those services. And it is a terrific, really, really important program. And for the folks whose lives are directly impacted by it, the students and their parents, it's just been an amazingly wonderful thing. And I think they are in about 33 of the school districts in the state, provide services. And that program had gotten moved around a lot over the years. And frankly, I had lost track of it because it worked. So when things that work very well, you don't hear much about. And most recently, they've been housed up at the Sherlock Center at Rhode Island College. And earlier this year, I think it's 13 teachers in that program got layoff notices. And they said they were required to go out to bid, which is troubling at several levels. I'm not even sure why they came to this conclusion for a program that's been around for as long as it's been around. And this is certainly, I'm old fashioned. I believe that the public sector and government should be providing services to folks in public education. It's a pretty simple philosophy, really. we were contacted by one of our members who has a child who benefits from the program to ask what we were doing about it. And we were already doing a lot, as it turned out, in conjunction with our colleagues at the Federation. And as Stephanie said, there's going to be a rally on behalf of this program next week. But the issue came to a head at the Board of Education meeting, where our very own president, Larry Pirtle, is a member of the board and raised a ruckus on behalf of the good guys. So let me turn it to him to tell the rest of the story.
I wish I could have raised more of a ruckus, actually. Several parents and students who spoke passionately and just eloquently about the program and what it would mean to them and the impact. Along with several people from the medical profession who talked about their work with the Sherlock Center and how this would be a real detriment to blind and visually impaired students in Rhode Island. All that took place during public forum, and as we all know, in public forum, usually there's no comment, there's no discussion. That's what public forum's for, just not to get into a debate. And it wasn't on the, we weren't going to talk about it necessarily on the agenda either. So the attorney for RIDE and for the Board of Ed, when people were done testifying, said, I want to make a couple comments. And to that, for me and Colleen Callahan, that just opened up the floodgates to a lot of questions that we had. I was very disappointed at both the attorney, the commissioner, and in fact, the chair. All three really kind of shut me off asking questions because they said I was violating the procurement laws and asking questions about the RFP. But the bottom line was that they were sending this out to bid because they said they had to, because Perkins was providing some services in Rhode Island. So now the Sherlock Center people weren't the only ones providing services in Rhode Island. The truth is they haven't been for several years. Districts have been, when there's been a shortage, going to Perkins. Some districts have been hiring their own teachers, and the system has worked. Sort of a multi-tier system, and people from Sherlock, the 13 teachers, have something like 200 years of experience in the field. But RIDE was determined to send this out to bid, and that's disturbing in itself because it seems that sending things out to bid and going to outside consultants and outsourcing is how we want to spend our money, and we disagree. Why are you ending a program that's been working very well? Everyone says the program works great. So my question was, why don't we just find a solution for it? And if you do have to send it out to bid, if that's true, and I'm not sure it is, but if it is true, then why don't you make the RFP so that it fits what's going on right now? And that's where, of course, I got shut down because to me, that just says, hey, we just want to send this out to bid because it's a little cheaper and a little easier for us, rather than what's best for these students. And the parents that were there and the students, as I said, were just terrific. But also, these are people who are speaking up for equity and everything we've been talking about throughout COVID and with different groups of people and different students. But they're also speaking up for students who can't speak up for themselves sometimes, students who might be blind, living in poverty, etc. So why do we want to disrupt the program that everyone says works? Makes no sense. Common sense just says, hey, just keep it going the way it is. And if you have to send it out to bid, send it out to so that it fits what's working. The problem is the Sherlock Center has been running a deficit. They really need money in the budget. And that's what the rally's about on Tuesday, to ask for. I think they need 2 million, maybe 2.5 million. We know there are legislators who are really interested in this now. And the scope of things, with all the money we have coming in from the federal government and all the money we spend, $2 million to help dozens, if not hundreds of students in Rhode Island seems like a real small fee.
And even independent of that, procurement rules and going out to bid is absolutely appropriate if you're buying paper and pencils and HVAC equipment and everything else. But when you're going out to bid on things provided by people, services provided by existing public employees, then someone's got an agenda. And that is something we constantly have to be on guard about. There are always folks trying to take advantage of existing public systems and turn them into a profit motive. And This is something that you have to pay attention to at the local and state and federal level, because it's a slippery slope.
One of the
Yes, no.
parents, one of the
I'm sorry.
parents did make that comment, and that sort of stuck with me, that she felt like this important service that her child is receiving was being treated like copy paper, like they were trying to find a vendor to provide copy paper. And that's heartbreaking and unfortunate.
We've seen it with privatization of custodial or cafeteria services. It's not as good as what can be provided by existing public workers, and any short-term gain is offset by a loss of quality or a loss of pay and benefits for those workers, which leads to increasing turnover, which also leads to a decrease in quality.
Think about that. 100 years of service you're going to eliminate. And there's a shortage of teachers out there now for the blind and visually impaired. So it's, again, it seems like RIDE is just interested in saving money and helping a private entity. And who's going to lose out? Students who they claim to, want to protect and help. So I got to believe that this can be resolved and fixed. It just needs to be done.
It needs to be, yeah, the motivation needs to be there to save it.
You need
And
to
now
have
they
motive.
agreed, right? They have officially agreed they will try and get a line item in budget to save
Yep.
this. So good job, Larry, and everybody else involved in this, and the parents and students who testified.
Yeah, I just would like that. I've got a few emails from parents thanking me and so forth. The real thanks goes to them for organizing all this and the passion they had in fighting for the right thing. And it's not just about their child. It's about all children who are blind and visually impaired. And,
It's about equity.
yeah.
About equity. Bob, you highlighted you highlighted legislators, and I know just from seeing their comments on Twitter, Julie Casimiro and Bill O'Brien, who this is on their radar and they're fired up about it. I also want to highlight a couple of reporters like Linda Borg from the Providence Journal, who wrote about this weeks ago, actually, a month ago, highlighting a particular student. And Steph Machado from Channel 12, who did a very deep dive, comprehensive piece putting this together, because it is slightly complicated. There's a lot of moving parts here, and I'll provide those links to those stories. But we're obviously passionate about it and want to make sure that folks turn out Tuesday at 3 o'clock at the Vets for this community to stand with them.
We are fired up.
We'll be there.
So speaking of fired up, Linda Borg, again, for Providence Journal, wrote a piece on standardized testing here in Rhode Island and the number of parents who are opting their kids out for a multitude of reasons. One of, if your kid has been distance learning for a year, suddenly they have to show up, haven't been in a school building in 12 months. Now they have to show up and take a giant test. So Bob.
This is
we know
foolish
that-
at so many levels. Obviously, we are not against testing. Educators do testing and assessment all the time of their students. Some of those tests are standardized tests, so you can get a baseline. And RICAS itself was finally, 25 years later, something logical compared to the Massachusetts MCAS test, so we could get a baseline, pick a plan, and stick to it. So all of that was good. But rules do get suspended during a pandemic, and they should be suspended during a pandemic. New Jersey just got a waiver to push their testing off to the fall. Our Department of Education decided not to ask because they are so looking down at their keyboards and not looking out at what's going on among the students in Rhode Island. They missed the big picture. And the big picture in this is there are out of the approximately 140,000 public school students in the system, there are 5,000 we simply cannot find. There are another 20,000 whose attendance is so low that any test for that additional group would also be meaningless. There's also a number of students who are fully engaged in distance learning for reasons of health or choice. And these tests have to be conducted in person. And those students are opting out not to take the test because if you've been out of school all year because you're worried about health implications, you're not going to come into school to take a standardized test, the results of which will not be available until the fall. This shows that once again, like the issue with the blind and visually impaired, they are simply not listening or behaving logically at the Rhode Island Department of Education. And someone needs to ride herd over them, that we are torturing students. You know, here's the thing. The results probably aren't going to be particularly good after a whole bunch of time in pandemic learning. We get that. The results would be a heck of a lot more valuable when a heck of a lot more students would take them and we could use them for that purpose. So I don't get it. I don't understand the logic. They can't explain the logic. A couple of policy wonks who love tests more than they love children have taken your students and wasted several days of their time.
And that's the real frustration there. Yes, you do want a baseline, and it does show where students are. And they, RIDE's point is we need the baseline for summer programs, which we're going to talk about in a minute, which almost seem non-existent right now. But teachers know what students they have that are struggling. Ask the teacher, Mr. Walsh knows that Larry Birtle is struggling in math. So he needs, yes, he needs help.
Why you married a math teacher.
That's why I married a math teacher. History, I got down by, almost. But it just, wouldn't we be better taking those days, those weeks, and use it for instructional time? And then testing once we have some of that instruction in and students come back and feel comfortable. As Bob said, you've been out for a year and you're coming back to take a test. I mean, how about the social emotional needs and just the interaction? If kids haven't seen each other in a year, coming back for the first day, I assume they're going to be interested in a lot of other things than taking a test. And one of it's going to be social interaction with their peers. So it just doesn't make any sense. And I think come October, we're going to be saying, told you so. And I hate doing that because that means we wasted some valuable time.
Yeah, it's going to happen come October. They're going to realize they need to test all the kids and they're going to try and do it again.
Just on a micro level, the anxiety of going into the building for the first time, I saw it in my daughter, she was nervous about going into the building for the first time. It's completely natural. Yeah. So to do that and compound that with a standardized test just makes no sense to me. Larry, you mentioned summer learning, and this week in the COVID briefing, the commissioner was there and she was extremely upbeat and happy, as she should be. She was reporting out on graduations and proms, etc. But there is this sort of elephant in the room of, yeah, we're talking about this quote unquote learning loss. But we're not talking about what we're going to do about it. And she very briefly mentioned an RFP, that she was going to make parts of an RFP public. And then she mentioned LEAP. It was slightly confusing. And I didn't kind of actually pick up all of it. So since you sit on the board, Larry, what was she talking about?
Well, the proms and the graduations. No, that's, we've talked about the social emotional part of this, and proms and graduations are terrific. On my bike ride the other day, I saw a couple of kids waiting for a ride to go to football practice. I mean, the fact that kids are getting back into activities and being, things that they normally do outside of pure academics that make school so important. But we know that we need some programs for the summer to help students. And we've talked about that on the show. Bob and I have talked about with our colleagues around the country that school can't end on the 18th and we're going to start this on the 19th. It can't be 6 hours a day. I mean, we have to think this through and do it right, but it needs to be done. Yet RIDE is sending out the RFP on how, for guidance on how we're going to do this and how some group, again, let's outsource it, can help school districts when school districts are already trying to plan and start to work with local groups like the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, summer camps and all that to set up some real meaningful programs. And I thought at the Board of Ed on Tuesday, we had it on our agenda to talk about guidance and the policy, and it got pushed off to the second week in May now. Second week in May, school's over basically, and it's almost too late. There doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency around helping students we talk about it. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to help kids who are behind. We need testing to see where they are. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? And it just doesn't seem to be that urgency. And on the flip side, as frustrating as hell, is it sounds like we're just going to send it out again and outsource it. And that's not the answer. People at the local level have the answer, or at least know what some of the questions are, and begin working on this. So it's extremely frustrating from our end.
And does
So
the
other than
guidance-
almost abandoning our students who are blind and visually impaired, testing students inappropriately, and not planning for the summer, at least we can have a prom.
So you said that. So we've talked about RFPs twice. We've talked about standardized testing. We have a great deal of money coming into the state, much of which is going to be for public education. How do you feel about, well, I know the answer to this question, obviously, but how do you feel about RIDE taking care of this money, or what do you see for the spend?
We cannot let this become another race to the top where all the money gets given to consultants for programs that go away when the money goes away. We need local input. We need legislative input. We need real input to make this effective. We have to think about the long-term implications of any decisions we make. We cannot use this to patch over holes in budgets and not think about the long-term implications of it. We have this crazy tax cap, spending cap situation here, where if they used any of this money to balance a budget to zero out property taxes, then the following year they'll be behind and they'll be creating structural deficits. So there's a lot of implications, and left to their own devices, you just fear they'll do it wrong. So we need a lot of external input so we do it right. And some of that money beyond which is specifically directed to education could well serve our public schools, if for nothing else than rebuilding them as part of a massive infrastructure project for the money that's designated to be used in that category. There's a great opportunity here as long as we're more logical than cutting programs for the blind or testing when we shouldn't, or ignoring summer learning. So
there were a lot of well-meaning people and work very hard at RIDE. And I just think, though, they're caught up in this bureaucracy of outsourcing and sending everything out to bid, when if you talk to local people and let them work it out. I was on a call last night with some other state presidents, and in Kansas, one of the things they're doing with their commissioner is reaching out to museums and zoos and art museums and so forth to see what programs they can set up, because they know, one, their teachers are burnt out for the summer. They know students are burnt out for sitting in a desk or sitting at home. So what can we do that's educational, that helps students and helps them learn, but is also can help meet their social emotional needs? What a great thing to do. They're trying to funnel some of their money into the zoos and museums to help over the summer. Great. Kids could spend the day at the zoo. They could also learn while they're there. I mean, that's just an example. But talk to the people who are actually doing it. Talk to, and you know, the three of us aren't in the classroom every day, but we talk to people who are in the classroom every day, and we know what they're saying. We know what they need, what they want. You know, sending out an RFP and getting, you know, some consulting group that you're paying thousands of dollars to, great. But when was the last time they were in, you know, a Providence Elementary School? When were they at your daughter's school? Or, you know, just, it doesn't make sense. And that's my fear. The money's not going to get to the local level as much as it should. A lot of it has to go to, you know, Title I and IDEA money, et cetera. But I'd rather see them, obviously, the money spent on local programs than going outsourcing. We have to stop outsourcing and believing that outside consultants are the real knowledgeable people, because they're not in the classroom every day.
Well, this was not the intentional theme of this particular episode of Ask Larry and Bob. It is certainly evident that a lot of introspection at the Rhode Island Department of Education is needed, and an analysis of what their true mission is, and getting them back to becoming an advocate for public education. It was probably a mistake for them to get involved in the takeover in Providence. I said also on last week's Lively Experiment, the commissioner shouldn't even be at the table. That's not her job. She's not the superintendent in Providence. They hired one to do
I
that.
have one.
So I think they really need, because if we're ever going to get a more systemic approach to statewide education, then RIDE has to be a trusted advocate for everyone in the process, including the educators. And right now they're not serving that role. And it is a real problem. Again, it just all gelled in this conversation we've been having in the last half an hour or so, that it really needs, if the idea is you're going to send something to them and they're going to turn around and look for a consultant, no one's going to send anything to them ever again. They need to be a convener. They need to be, you know, a Switzerland for all the warring tribes and public education in Rhode Island to come together and have peace talks, not actively take sides where they are sadly but correctly perceived as not on the side of parents or students or educators on various topics. And that's frightening now that I'm saying it out loud. And it's not the way it was designed to be or was supposed to be.
You know, one of the things that RIDE has said over the past 2 or 3 years, and I fully agree with, they've tried to get away from, you know, being a regulator and being more of assisting communities and locals and being a resource. And that's what they need to be. I mean, local like Narragansett needs to say, hey, you know, we need to do this program with this group. How can you help us? Or who can, what guidelines do you have for that? Or who can you put us in touch with? Or what would you recommend for that? That's where they can really help. You know, saying we're going to test every kid or we're going to, you know, outsource to some outside group. It's like the group that met for LEAP. They had 6 meetings and they came to the conclusion that kids were going to fall behind and they needed to do something. Gee, you could have paid me $10,000. I could have told you that in 30 seconds. We could skip all the meetings.
The public does not want to see jargon and mission statements and cleverly and carefully worded multi-page reports. They just want to see action and results. It's, you know, NEA nationally was involved when the United States Department of Education was created as a cabinet level position in the 1970s when Jimmy Carter was president. And more than once I have observed to them in my long time of service to NEA that if you put the existence of the US Department of Education on a ballot for our members, most recently when Betsy DeVos was in charge, they would have voted to shut it down because it was that bad. And I wonder how our own folks, and not just our members, but the public in general, views the Rhode Island Department of Education. That's a big deal. That's something that we need to explore. This is not the direction I expected today to go, but this is the direction we are in. So what's on my mind is what we learned from talking today.
And I just can't stop, I guess. But another thing that really frustrated me at the RIDE meeting on Tuesday.
Let it out, Larry. Let it all out.
We had this wonderful presentation about the new dashboard and all the information that's out there. I mean, you as a parent could go on and find your school, what courses are being offered. If you're a student of color, how many students of color have taken it, have passed, white students, comparable between districts. My question was, do you have this in any other language but English? Can it translate to another language? It's only in English. So we talk about reaching, you know, students of color and parents of color and new people coming into the state and from outside the country, and yet in all this transparency, and it's only in English. I don't get it.
Well, when you're serving multiple constituencies and you know that's an issue, yeah.
Top of mind, should be. Well, I'm going to make us switch gears to higher education. And many times here, we've mentioned that the public policy conversation around vaccination requirements was imminent and coming. And I think it's probably here at this point because for college students, many colleges across the country are requiring student vaccinations, Brown University being the latest. We know that our folks, Roger Williams University, will be requiring students to vaccinate for the fall in 2021. Can you guys talk a little bit about that vaccination requirement and how that may translate for college faculty and staff. Will there be requirements in place for that? Bob, can you kick us off a little bit here?
Yeah, we are not yet aware of any management requirements that faculty and staff in higher ed or K-12 education get vaccinated. We didn't mention it yet, so I'm pleased on the K-12 level that 89% of our folks in the K-12 world have gotten at least one shot in the arm, which is about as good as it gets in the country. And I suspect when we do the analysis, we'll probably find similar or better results among higher education faculty and staff. I don't think we've taken a public position on vaccinations for all students, but I will take a personal position. Yeah, it's a good idea. We require it across a number of other medical issues as preconditions for enrolling, even in our public schools. If we have an acceptable, you'll hear, by the way, just to nip this one in the bud, the naysayers, because there are always some. Usually we disagree with them on lots of other political issues as well. We'll say, well, it's not officially an approved vaccine yet. Well, technically the approvals so far are under the emergency provisions. We fully expect all the vaccines will get full approval well before school opens in September. So that is a non-issue. It's just throwing mud on the wall by the opposition to the anti-vaxxers, essentially. So this is going to be with us for a while, and it's just smart. I mean, it's just, did you notice that the world shut down for a year and we can do something to not have that happen? Be part of the solution, not continuing the problem.
I'm hoping that most of the faculty and staff through other eligibility have been able to get vaccinated despite our efforts and the efforts at the NEA national level to get higher ed faculty prioritized. That did not happen, but hopefully they were able to get vaccinated through other means. Larry, I know.
Everybody's eligible. If folks have not missed that headline, by April 19th, everyone in the state's eligible.
Yes, that's true. Larry, you're fully vaccinated at this point. You passed the 2-week?
I'm past my 2 weeks. I'm fully vaccinated, and outside of a little feeling achy and sore and chills, because I did have a little reaction. I got a little too cocky there in the beginning and saying, oh, I feel good. And when 8 hours later, man, think about what Bob was right. Think about what we just went through for a year. And that by getting vaccinated, we can prevent going through that again. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I don't want to do this again. And all the problems I had, and say, oh, I don't want to get the, vaccinated, which solves the problem.
Bob, you're on your way, right?
I'm on my way. Today.
One shot down.
I get my shot, and Larry's warned me about potential side effects, and but it's well worth the any if I have a day worth of side effects. It's just so important. We're trying to lead by example here, and
my eligibility bracket comes up on Monday, so I'm looking forward to securing an appointment.
And certainly with the increase in production, the numbers are what, 20,000 openings tomorrow night are gone.
20,000 tonight, yeah. Maybe
tonight at 5, yeah.
Openings tonight. There are multiple places you can go. There's the state-based system, there are community-based systems. They're opening them up everywhere. And let's give Dan McKee big credit, one, for his leadership in getting the educators in place, and two, for just being, the top cheerleader for getting this thing done and putting the operational systems in place. Tony Silva, who is our new governor's chief of staff, is temporarily assigned to being the vaccine COVID czar, which is cool. And so many of the folks who are working the clinics and the volunteers at the clinics, it is just amazing. If you haven't been yet, when you go in, whatever frustrations you have navigating getting an appointment are more than made up for by the remarkable, wonderful efficiency of the actual clinic to get there. This is a model of how government, with a lot of volunteers helping, works at its best in dealing with the crisis. So A+ for Rhode Island. I think we're second in the country now with percentage of the adult population vaccinated. And Governor McKee gets huge credit for leading these efforts along with.
Yes.
It's almost a
keep it
party
up.
atmosphere. It's almost a party atmosphere when, and seriously, when you
Yeah,
get, people are happy, the people giving it to you. I mean, it's just, yeah. It's
it's a good
a
thing.
feel good.
It's like voting. It's a celebration. It should be like voting. It's almost a
Sure.
celebration. You go and you're participating in something for the betterment of our state, and it's just great. So
Looking forward to it. So all of that's good, but we still have to be safe and smart and mask and do all of those other mitigation techniques to keep ourselves and our friends, family, and neighbors safe.
Yep.
That's all I have for today. Thank you very much, you guys.
Thank you.
thank you, as always, Stephanie, for leading us through. We took a little turn, and
We
I
did
think
unexpectedly.
revisit the role of the Department of Education in future conversations.
Mhm.
And it's an important role, and in higher education as well. Good conversations to have.
Indeed. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.